Welcome to the Inner World of Filmmaking. I'm your host, Tammy McGarrow. I'm an editor, podcaster, and still photographer. In this show, I will interview filmmakers in all facets of production and distribution. We're diving into the world of the music photographer with guest Nancy Clendaniel. She is best known for her work as the house photographer for the Beverly Theatre in Beverly Hills. Some of her clients were KRLA Radio, American Red Cross, and the Grammy Awards. She was the personal photographer for legendary disc jockey Wolfman Jack. She has photographed musicians like Bob Dylan, Tina Turner, Sonny and Cher, Cyndi Lauper, and so many more. Nancy also served as the director of the nonprofit organization Women in Photography International from 1987 to 2000. Welcome, Nancy. So happy to have you on the show today.
Hi, oh my goodness, who is that you're talking about? That can't be me. How can a 30-year-old do that much?
Right, I know. My God, I mean, I am so impressed with everything you've done.
Thank you.
Can't wait to hear more about it. So why don't you tell me about your start, which was actually in theater, and then going to shooting music concerts.
Well,
how did that all begin?
I have to. You made me, when you mentioned Sonny and Cher, you made me realize that was my first music photo in 1964. And I had my mother's very old plastic, fantastic camera. And that I went backstage and took some pictures, like 3 or 4 pictures. And that was the first time. And I thought, I love this. I'm a nervous wreck, but I love capturing working with these artists, capturing these moments. And then I got to stay and sing the show. So that was, so Sonny and Cher, that was the peak of their success. Little did either of us, they didn't know. They were just starting out. I was just starting out. And then from that time, I moved to Chicago. I got an offer at the St. Nicholas Theater, which was David Mamet's theater. And so suddenly here was this amazing David Mamet. And then, what he's gone on to achieve. He's an amazing, wonderful guy. And so I had that. And I was the whole time learning as I was going, saying, yes, I can do that. And then running home and into the dark room and saying, can I make that or can I save that? A lot of black and white film at that time because color film was costly. And when you're printing, if you had an issue with lighting or any kind of thing, you could work with it, contrast or something like that. But with color, it was just what you had. And at that time, color negative film was really bad. And color Ektachrome, Photochrome was very expensive. And hardly anybody shot that except, I would say, the really upper crust doing Time Life, that kind of, because of the cost.
Wow. So what camera were you shooting on?
Boy, oh boy, I started with an Olympus OM1. I had a wonderful teacher of photography, visual thinker named Phil Douglas, who he did a bunch of visual workshops. And he was amazing about just seeing and cropping it in the moment. So anyway, that was kind of my education in visual communication.
Wow. And then film photography, or, film back then. So you'd get usually, wasn't it that you would buy the film based on the ISO? So you would decide, well, what kind of shooting am I going to do? And then that's the,
right.
So you're
right.
Kind of, if you're going in and out, you're having to switch. Did you have like a couple cameras to shoot with so that you could go in between? Or
I had usually 2 cameras, and I had the wonderful advantage of working with Richard's Photo Lab, which was a wonderful fella. I'm sure he's long retired, long gone. And he would say, here, he'd give you a brick of film, which was 20 rolls, and say, here, so you have enough for tonight. And then he knew I'd bring it back and process the film. And by the time I shot the film, I was paid for the shoot. And then I could pay him. It was such strange. But we were all doing that. And it was just a very unusual time because I think we were all trying things that had never been done. Pushing film. I remember pushing film to 1600. I came out with Miles Davis, and he had one light with a blue gel on it. That's it. And I thought, oh my God. And this was a big act. There was a lot of people wanting these pictures, and it was a nightmare. But you could push the film to 1600, maybe higher. It was grainy, but at least you got an image. It's like, okay, if you're just going to use that one blue light, what am I going to do? Oh, yeah, yeah,
Well, I mean,
crazy.
and it must be a lot more stressful back in the day. Probably little did you know, because now with digital cameras, I mean, all you have to do is shoot it. You look, you go, oh, shoot, it's blurry. Let's take another one. But you're just like having to just go, okay, I hope I'm getting the best shots, especially in lower light where, you know,
Oh,
a
yeah.
low, you know, the shutter speed can tend to go lower, which means blurred shots. So you're always having to, and I was going to talk about like Tina Turner, who's very active and runs around the stage, to somebody like Bob Dylan, you know,
Oh,
very
yeah.
different. And so how did you capture, well, maybe we should go back because I think we're jumping into music. So what transitioned you to come to LA and start shooting music concerts?
God. I think it was working for John Davidson, and that again, he had been through a situation in his own life, and he was top billing everywhere, but he was at a country club in Kentucky that burned down. And in the fire, he lost his musical conductor, who was a dear friend, and the entire, I mean, there were hundreds of lives lost. He just happened to get out. I mean, he knew. So when he came through that, his personal transition, he wanted to teach what he knew. As a singing entertainer, he describes himself as singing entertainer. And so he founded with his own money over on Catalina Island. He rented out a school, now the Catalina Island, it's a school in Toyonbe, and he interviewed and auditioned singing entertainers from all over the U.S. and Canada. And he would 2 sessions in 1978, which is when I worked, and in 1979, it was all his own thing. And he brought in people like Kenny Rogers, Florence Henderson, Shields and Yarnell. Oh my goodness, so many people, producers, people that would come and talk to these talented, gifted artists who wanted to do, and they would talk about the whole aspects of being in the entertainment field, not just that you had a gift, but how did you market that, and how did you trust it, and how did you book? And I mean, it was a massively wonderful, unique idea. And in my opinion, he is the original to something like American Idol. So many of those people have gone on; they're known artists. So, I mean, and they went on to work doing amazing things. I won't brag, but they're just amazing. Everything from soap opera stars to recording artists, all in the 2 year period. And so I was there working in a dark room that at the nighttime, the wild boars on the island would get into the dark room and eat the film cans, and it was crazy, but it was on the island, and so you have what you had. But it's, when you look back at how anybody at the beginning and has a chance to start, it was so unique. Had that situation with David Mamet in Chicago, but Chicago was a tough town. And environmentally and just personally, it was really just hard. Things weren't happening. So I just decided to move to California and stayed in Hollywood, and it all opened up from there.
I find it very fascinating what leads us to the next thing. And it's all through the work that we do and putting yourself out there and networking. And you just never know where the next job is going to land you.
And what keeps you excited about it. I'm still as excited today about if I see an artist or performer and I'm just like, oh, there's something about when you see such a gift and you think, wow, that's, and you want to capture that moment. You want to, and in a way, it's kind of strange, but you're in that environment. And most of the time I shot right from the stage, from the side of the stage. And it's just something about being that in close proximity. You just absorb it, maybe 10 times more, but it sure was a blessing. Except for one time, I have to say, where it nearly killed me, is with Jerry Lee Lewis. I was working 10 feet from behind him because he was so dramatic, and he would put his foot up on the bench. He was very out. It was great. And I'd been shooting for maybe half an hour, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go to the stage and get him shooting from behind. I did not know that at one point in his act, he kicks his stool, and it missed me had it not been for a security guard that took me down. I'd have probably hit Tool in the head. Now, the security guard saved my life, really. And I have, what I learned here, it's so funny. I didn't know until I had the film process, because it was color film, that I got the moment that as I fell, I shot. I will show you that, and it's still to me amazing that that happened, because the bench in the shot is squarely kicking and the bench flying at my head. That's so funny, but that was a gift that almost was an injury. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
but such a photographer to get the shot. You know, even as
yeah.
you're going down, you're still taking the shots.
I didn't know I
That's
was
great.
going down. I was right behind. I think the security guard had seen a rehearsal or knew what happened, and I should have known, because I've saw Jerry Lee in other situations, and I knew that he gets really vigorous, but I didn't think about the bench and how close I was to his bench. Anyway, shoo.
Wow, that is so cool. Now, what led you? So I know that we were talking earlier about the Beverly Theatre and then working with disc jockey Wolfman Jack, and it kind of happened around the same time. So what then led you to work with the disc jockey Wolfman Jack, and what were you doing for him?
That was through, I was working at the time for KRLA Radio, which is a top radio station. And also because I was married to Wolfman Jack's writer, there would be, you wouldn't be so surprised. There would be a knock on my door in Hollywood, on our door. Knock on the door, you open up, it's Wolf. And you go, oh, and you go, hey, I got some coffee. And he goes, my wife blew threw me out. I gotta have some coffee. You never knew when Wolf was going to show if he wasn't in the studio, which was right in the Taft building in Hollywood. Uh, he would, if something happened, he was that kind of a lovely guy, but he could be at your doorstep. So um, that was all situation. So he just sort of, he liked my work, and I started just taking more and more shots. And then when he got the gig with KRLA, and then he got some other things he was doing, it was just so natural. And he was comfortable with me, and I was comfortable with him. You get to certain levels of personalities or talent. It's a very family thing. And I felt like almost one of the family. My husband was the writer, and I was part of it. And they trusted me, and I respected them. And there was never a shot that I published that they didn't approve. Just because you're out there doing what you do, it doesn't mean that you have no right. In fact, there's a shot I did of Tina Turner that everyone went, wow, that's great. And it's her kicking, and it's not the most flattering shot, but it captured her energy. But later, it was a manager that she was not, she had wished there had been a more, I won't say raunchy, but it made me really step back and really regard uh, about the responsibility that you have when you're documenting a moment, even if they're on stage. It's like there's a human being in there, and yeah,
Yeah, that's really nice. I mean, as you say it, it should be so obvious, but I think, especially with the photographers of TMZ and all that, where they're just getting the shots, we forget that we're dealing with human beings, and that's really
yeah,
respectful to think about that. So then, what led you? Like, how long did you work for Wolfman Jack?
10 years, and 10 years at the Beverly Theatre. It was that period in the 1980s, and it's so strange how everything sort of came to an end. Wolf, for his health and his personal family life, he and his family decided to move back to they had a farm or ranch in North Carolina, I think it was. Anyway, they wanted to get away from the craziness of Hollywood. And then the Beverly Theater closed, and so suddenly there was no Wolf, no Beverly, and then I got a divorce, and it was like, okay. Seattle's nice. I had been here on my way to cover the Olympic Games in Calgary years before when I was doing more of that kind of thing. And I thought Seattle was so beautiful and could do with a bit more sun, but when it comes, you're grateful, you know? So,
So let's talk about the Beverly Theater. I'm assuming that you probably have a place to shoot, but you can walk me through that. And also that you probably have access to backstage. Or do you? Like,
yes.
what is your job? What's the whole thing?
I was hired, and it's again, I have to mention Dan, who was a really good friend of ours. He's a friend of Wolf's. He was a friend of my husband and mine, and he is an amazing publicist. And Dan Agri said, they're going to need a photographer at this theater. They can only give you this flat rate, but do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah. And there was a few times that I didn't, and I regret it.
Yeah. So when you're there, is there a pit that you go to up front to shoot, or is there a section for photographers? And then do you get on stage? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think nowadays that's more restricted for a lot of different reasons. But back then, not so much. Depended on the venue. Like if you were at the Greek Theater, there was one place where you could shoot from, and you knew it was relatively safe, and you're not going to be. And that's when I learned not to wear a white jacket when I was shooting, because the guy with the lighting man later said, "Don't you ever wear a white jacket again," because his light was bouncing off. It was catching the eye because I was right at the stage. Never wear Hirachi sandals at week, those leathery ones. And you learn it. I wound up spending the night in my bare feet. But there's at the Beverly, usually you were allowed down front. I was, and then backstage specific areas. And usually too, it depended on a lot of the artists just wanted to leave, instantly. One of the few times that I went backstage was a good time because it was Quincy Jones and his wife Peggy Lipton showed up, and it was one of the few backstage before the show because usually, everybody leave them alone. I think because I know how I am before I work, and you have to prepare, and you don't need distractions, and you don't need a camera in your face. So I usually went backstage afterwards.
So what was the funnest moments backstage? I mean, were they partying and stuff, or was some people calmer and other people were had everybody in there?
Yeah, not so many parties. I mean, there was not very few. I think very few parties, because I know Tina Turner did a party after, but after what she left on stage, she was wiped out. I mean, she went up, she made an appearance, but I felt for that as a woman, as a human being, she had just given the most amazing performance. She's one of the most amazing I've ever seen.
Like, who did you feel did you get to interact with some of the artists, or did you pretty much were more of a fly on the wall?
There was a few times when I wasn't a fly on the wall. I was uncomfortable. I would say hello, but I'd like to be invisible because the artist was usually dealing with good friends or people who were doing business and marketing and things who had come a long way. So, but there was one time, and I'm forgetting his name, but he was just about punched the security guard who didn't recognize Tom Petty. And the security guard was a big guy who didn't recognize Tom Petty. And Tom Petty had his arm back, and he was like this. And I just took his hand and I stepped in front of Tom Petty and said, "It's okay. He's with me." And Tom Petty breathed a sigh of relief. I breathed a sigh of relief. Security guard, I don't know what was wrong with him. He's there to not let people backstage. So, but what Tom Petty did do was backstage, he allowed me, Dwayne Eddy was the artist. That was his friend. And so Tom Petty said, you will be the only picture of me with Tom Petty that night. I got the shot and then let Tom Petty have fun with Dwayne Eddy.
Right.
That was
Oh
it.
my gosh. So when you're backstage with these artists, are you just kind of like more, as you were saying, just in the background? Is there any kind of like shots you're thinking I need to get, or is it just more capturing moments wherever you feel?
Capturing
Okay.
moments. Yeah.
Well, who was there anybody that was like really talkative to you while you were in there and very engaging, or most people were interacting with their friends and other people just
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay, come on in.
And I didn't want to interact. It broke my focus because there were moments when you would see like a little girl, or you'd see again, you see somebody come in and you think, oh, okay, there's going to be a moment. How can I position myself? Because you can't easily move. It was pre-COVID and pre all kinds of things. You couldn't get that close to an artist. But then again, there could be a crowd of people. But I'm sure the theater had security guards, and I'm sure the artist had security guards at the same time. Even though it felt like a casual group of people, everyone was gathering and talking and sipping. Um, I'm sure that there was someone watching.
So, okay, I know as a photographer, like when you're on something, you're taking probably thousands of pictures. I don't know, maybe you're not, but like, how many rolls of film were you taking to a concert? Like, and how many photos were on a roll?
36 on a roll. And if you were lucky, if you knew how to, and my friend Henry Diltz confirmed this, when you load your film a certain way, you could get 37, sometimes 38 shots. The most I ever had was 20 rolls of film of 36. And there was a lot of times sometimes it was Henry, sometimes it was other. Henry Diltz and I worked together a lot, because I think we were trusted and that we wouldn't betray the artist, and we would usually back off, but we didn't shoot the whole show. We would just come in, get, and go. But you had to have that in your bag.
Wow. So you really have to be very selective, I guess, of what you're taking shots of. So when you're shooting like a stage, is there certain shots you know you need to get to, like somebody at the mic, somebody with the guitar? Like, is there setups that you're like, okay, I've got to get these X shots, or it's like, nope, just whatever I capture?
Whatever is there, because sometimes, obviously, I think the artist will be more relaxed after they're 10, 15 minutes into the show. So sometimes I would often wait to shoot until that happened. I wouldn't just stay and linger, because they have so much going on, and the energy that's not endless.
So how long do you typically stay for the whole concert, or you're only staying for a period of time?
A lot of times it was somebody I really, really, really love, like Tina Turner, uh, or Ray Charles, oh my God, or B.B. King. Those guys, I just stayed. Sometimes it's just if you love the artist and the show unfolds, and it's exciting to see. But you just can't, you don't have to catch every moment. And in fact, it sort of honors the audience too, to back off and to let them have, because I had sometimes there were people in the front row and I would be very concerned about annoying them. No, I didn't use the flash, but still, it's somebody distracting. There's energy distracting from the artist, and the artist feels it. Because I know people like B.B. King or Ray Charles. Ray Charles, I have a funny story. Ray Charles. I was shooting again, maybe 8 to 10 feet from his keyboard. I was shooting up front, and all of a sudden, about 10 minutes into the show, every time he did the downbeat, he would take both his feet and point them in my direction. They would come outside of the piano bench and they'd go toward my direction, which I thought was strange, but I didn't get it until a gentleman came up to me and said, Mr. Charles is distracting. The click of your camera is distracting him. And I immediately pulled back and I thought, oh my God, of course, he can hear the click of my camera. Most artists, not so much. And a lot of artists, not as many as now, but a lot of artists wore earplugs. In fact, I have to thank Tina Turner's guitarist who said to me at one point, I worked with Tina quite often, including the "Why Don't You Be Good to Me" video shoot and that kind of thing. He said, "Are you not wearing earplugs?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Get them." And I think I contribute what's left of my hearing to this wonderful young guitarist who said, "Get earplugs," because I never thought about it.
Right. But it's so obvious once you say it because you are the closest up front. I mean, it must be
Yes,
loud.
yes. And you're right by the monitor sometimes. But did you think of that when you're 30 years old? No.
So were you red carpet then and inside, or what did you do at the Grammys?
Here's the setup of the Grammys, and anybody who worked any of the awards, the Grammys, the Oscars, I think, and it's a real wake-up call, like, okay, you have a place to be, and this is your place. You go backstage, and they have 3, and they're segmented by just curtains and PVC pipe with curtains, and the first section is for the TV film cameras to get the artists as they come on stage with their awards off, and the second one has radio, and then the very third was press, and I was in press. If anybody was gonna cut, and say, "Okay, I'm done with this, I'm leaving," it would be after they did the radio, and they would slip out on the press. So I was in the last thing, except for the one night, and I thank Michael Jackson forever for this. The year that he got all the awards in the world, and everybody was waiting for him in my section with the press. "Where's Michael? He's coming back. He's got all these Grammys, 20 minutes, 30 minutes." We figured he split. So it was myself, one other photographer, and we just thought, "Oh, the poor we were taking our time." And then in comes Michael Jackson, Dionne Warwick, I mean, you name it, and they all came in at one time, and it was just 2 photographers left. And then they slipped out, but they were very gracious, very sweet, but, yeah, lucky. There's lucky moments,
Oh, did
but
you do that a lot? Were you at the Grammys a lot, or?
every year. I usually had an artist or someone who, at a PR company who wanted specific stuff, and then once you were in the door, you had your press, you had your credentials. At the Grammys, they gave you had your name, you had a thing and that's where you stood. And if you left it, I left it 1 year, I had to get to the bathroom, and I came back and forget it. There was no way I was gonna get back in this pond. But walking out thinking, "Oh, I've blown it," who did I run into? Julian Lennon, and I went, "What's Julian?" He was, like, 5 feet away, and he was very young, very kind, and he let me take, like, 2 shots backstage. But had I not had to go to the bathroom and leave and lost my spot in the Grammys place, I wouldn't have been able to see Julian, so
Were you shooting digital at some point? Like, because didn't digital cameras come out at some point, or you were always just film the whole time?
I was filmed the whole time. I wanna say I can't think of the artist. Again, a lot of the artists, Manhattan Transfer and, some people that I worked with over the years, primarily everything I have is film, which I'm glad, and I'm digitally preserving it so that it will at some point it's an extra security, to have that. I have about 5 of these, these external hard drives. So that way you can put, okay, this kind of music or that or whatever you're doing, you know. It's all about keeping it organized. That's getting it to museums, and things like that where it will be preserved. Because the woman who was my mentor, Betty Bennett, she was Dick Clark's photographer. And so when she passed, I was recipient of her work, and it's sitting in my closet, and it breaks my heart. Keep them safe. You'll know when to either let them go to a museum or a gallery or something like that. But so far, I'm still looking.
Yeah. And you exposed your photos as well. Do you have did you have a
I have a
dark
room.
room, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. My fingers used to be permanently yellow from the fixer and the chemicals. not good. But yeah, I don't. So when I'm trying to think, it was maybe 20 years ago was the last time I did darker, and it was like, okay, it's time to. There was a young student of mine, and he said, "Oh, I need to buy some equipment." And I said, "Why don't you buy mine?" So I know that he went on to use it, and I miss it because, oh my goodness, you could put on some nice jazz music, and you could be in there for 10 hours, and I miss it. But I do everything this season, and that season's gone. Now what's next? So,
Right, exactly. Well, and it must be so like just surreal to be able to see the photo come to life in the dark
oh, it
room.
is.
Yeah.
There's nothing like. Have you done that?
No, I haven't. No.
You need to do it, and you can still. I think you can still get the chemicals. You need to do it. Wear gloves so you don't get yellow fingers. But it's really, and it's also a creative process that I think people are excited about, and I think photography won't go away, but I think as a mainstay of production, it's been replaced. I think the last time I shot film, it's just
Well, so music videos, where
yeah.
would you position yourself on set as they're filming? Were you close to the camera person getting the shot?
You just had to instinctively try to find a spot, and I was also very concerned, especially after the thing with about Ray Charles hearing like the click of my camera. So, and it was also it coincided with me getting my first zoom lens. I never, that's something I should talk about. I never had a zoom lens. I worked with either a wide angle or a 100 meter, 200 meter, a long distance, never something that you could go from 50 to 200, nothing. So
Yeah,
that's why you need a bunch of cameras. Yeah.
right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because you have the what is it? The
Wide
wide
angle.
angle to catch everything, but then you have to have kind of the zoom, or not zoom, but the longer range, like 100
Yep.
meters, to be able to get the close-ups, and that's why they're
Oh, yeah.
swapping. But yeah, thank God for the zoom because now you don't have to move at all. But there's something to the
Well, also,
focal that you have
yeah,
to move to your end position, compose.
also the thing was if you ran out of film, and that would happen, and you would just go, "Oh, no. Oh, okay, I'm on shot number 27 and you're 37. Do I have 38?" You didn't know. And in fact, one of my favorite photos of the Manhattan Transfer, and it became their promo shot, was number 37 on a roll of 36. That is, thank you, God. That's a gift. Thank you. Because it was, of all the shots, they went, that's the one. And I was like, shoo, okay, last shots.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just different considerations, that I didn't, that you just don't think about when you're doing digital because now with these memory sticks, I mean, you can just
Oh,
shoot all day long and another day and another day.
you could go out for a month with one bag. I mean, truthfully, the stress that used to happen, I mean, there's still things that break down, and you better have a backup. Nothing like back then when it was the film. The issue with you had this much film for this much time, and you had to think about each shot. Like, okay, what time are we into the show, or what time are the awards? Like with the Grammys. Okay, well, is this who else is coming? Let me think. You weren't going to get out of there. You'd never get back in. So,
Well, and also if you're at the end of a role and you know somebody's coming, you better be swapping that out, not while they're there.
I think photographers, they don't go through that anymore unless they've decided to try film for fun, you know. And love, in fact, I'm sitting here with some of the early stuff I have with Lone Warwick, 1981, and film. I'm glad to have a physical memory of all the years of work, the years that have gone on, so many of the trips or the other work that I've done, that's all you have. Or you have got this, you got your hard drive.
Right, hard drive, yeah. Any thoughts for photographers in composing a shot? Like you're doing music video, whether you're doing a film set or music video or whatever. do you take a moment and you're looking at the whole frame? Because sometimes you can take a shot and you're like, oh my God, look at what's in that shot. Why didn't I reposition it? And now it's like, what are your thoughts? Any tips for when you're shooting?
Composition is someone that's just actually, it was encouraging me to go out and teach composition, which is something I haven't done in a long time, but it's a critical element now, whereas it used to be technical. There was things you could do, but now when you can do about anything with your camera, you have to know a little bit about composition. You have to know about where the weight of the composition, what's going on in the frame, and what you want to matter. And a lot of that it can be color now if you have really focused red or yellow, again. But I wasn't dealing a lot with color because, again, I was mostly black and white. So you had to have structurally, and your composition had to be spot on. If you had to be looking in a different way than you do with color, because color is deceiving and it can mask a lot of faults with the composition. If you're doing portraits, and I got on to doing a lot more portraits in more recent years, and you just want to your concentration is on the composition. I used to tell my students the 4 elements of a good picture, but I don't know if it's changed or not, but it was if you had something that was shiny, you have light, shine, texture, if you had some kind of or color. But these days, it changes a bit because you have so much you can just do with your phone. But you still have to be aware of if you're taking a color picture and you want someone with that red dress in the center of the shot, unless you want to have full focus to the left, because if you have someone in a bright yellow dress or a bright red dress, that will be the focus, no matter what's going on, unless there's somebody about to dive on the woman in the picture, that will be your focus. So color is a bigger part than it used to be to this black and white visual artist,
Right. But wasn't it like, and we talked about stress too, is, when people are moving around the stage a lot, how do you capture that shot? Because you've really, did you take your time and just go, okay, I'm just going to kind of wait for the moment? Or, especially with film, you can't be like, bing, 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 hoping you get something within that,
I think depending on the artist, when you, again, working with like Tina Turner or somebody who was very active, so you knew you were going to have to get shots of her when she's more her full body, because and it could be a little blurry because that was her energy, But if you're dealing with B.B. King, you want that tight shot where you see on the fret BB, and you see his hands. I still do. I'm fascinated if you have an artist, the hands or what's going on in the face or what's going on if it's a dancer. You don't always need the face. You just need the physical form and the story that's telling without the face and expression on the face.
Did you ever get to shoot Prince?
I did. Do you want to hear my story? You're going to cringe. Okay. Prince was doing a video with Sheila E. And it wasn't Prince's video. Sheila was a friend. He was working with her. And it was at a castle someplace. Anyway, it was in a major outdoor set. And so I go and I'm fully loaded. I'm told, get there. And then the security guard, who was probably 7 foot tall, 400 pounds, said, no photos of Prince. No photos. You are here to shoot Sheila. Oh
no.
No, I kept my word. And he was walking by me, killing me. But here I was, and here's what happened. It's kind of a gift. There was an older gentleman sitting in a chair watching us filming, lovely looking guy. And I took a couple shots of him, and later they said, that's Prince's dad.
Oh, wow.
And I got these really cool shots of Prince's dad, which he was very happy that I got these pictures of his father. But it's still, I cringed because he walked by me and I was, every part of me was like, whoa, but I gave my word.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
So
and it was hard.
So what was he like? I mean, did you get a sense? I mean, he was so talented. I mean, was he
Yeah,
friendly? Did he talk or pretty much kept to himself and what he was doing?
very quiet, interacted. He had the visual, the setting was magnificent. He could see everything. I mean, he was directing this, and over, and then he would go up to Sheila, and he would go up and he would just adjust something, lay down here by the water. It was a reflective pond, and they dyed it black because of the reflection would be more dramatic. And so when they were shooting this thing, they were getting a really, it was an amazing location. It was a really, really hard, I gotta say, to keep my word, but it was worth it because I came away knowing I didn't cheat. And the picture I got of his dad, I didn't know it was his dad. So he didn't mind, and there was no upset because the last thing you wanted to do when you had the opportunity to work with Prince was to degrade the position or not honor his wishes.
You had to
You
visually
know,
be snapping
I
shots.
don't know. He was not a large man, but he was beautiful, beautiful skin, beautiful, but his concentration was that of an artist. I mean, you just could feel it. But when he laughed like a just full blown. He wasn't so focused that he just couldn't take a break and laugh and get it. But he was focused on the product, which was this production, which was beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. And I saw that you also shot Berlin, Carrie Nunn. I love
Harry Nunn,
her.
oh, she's wonderful. She's wonderful. And she's one again, now that was very early on with Berlin. Again, this was early 80s. She was amazing on stage. I have never seen anybody so dramatic. In fact, my favorite image, and she liked it as well, was one of her, and it's a blur. Her hair is like this, but it's her energy. It's that same thing about capturing the energy of the artist.
What are you doing now? You're doing street photography? Do you still go out there and shoot? And
No, right now what I'm doing is digitally preserving my archives, and so I'm scanning and giving some. I gave a big patch because I worked in Catalina for that in the with John Davidson and Catalina Island Museum, and so I just donated that portion of my work, and that included Kenny Rogers, a lot of people from that time. That's in that museum now. So they will hopefully take care of it. I'm at that point, and I think every photographer that I know that's worked as long as I have, you get to the point when you have the physical boxes of what you have, you got to make sure they're preserved, but that's a challenge. So I'm negotiating with the Beinecke Library at Yale, trying to find other libraries who I think would honor and preserve because, again, you just don't want to see your life's work wind up in a file cabinet someplace. You'd like to see it shared,
right. Yeah. And you have some amazing shots. So it's like, of course, it just brings you back to a time in your life. And especially as you get older, it's like you kind of look back and go, God, those were the days. Not that older isn't the days, but just like I find for myself, like,
Those are. And those were the times when, again, you could work with an artist in a different manner. And just was a difference. It was different. And it's like, I'm very glad when I see what people are having to deal with now. I'm very glad that I was given that decade, especially in the 80s. And then it got to me to work with some of the legendary people. I find it so hard to think, wow, Ray Charles is gone, B.B. King is gone, Wolfman is gone.
Prince
Oh,
is
no,
gone.
Prince is gone. I mean, these people, I mean, Cyndi Lauper's still here. Tina's still hopefully taking it easy and enjoying herself.
Bob
Boy, she's a
Dylan.
heart. Bob Dylan, yeah, yeah. But it's amazing, isn't it? So I tell you who I never photographed Beatles, and I was a passionate Beatle fan, but I think their excitement and what opening the door to music, I don't think, I think the Beatles were, I don't think there'll be anything like them ever again. I think that
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about the music of today, and then I don't know if you heard about this, but Stranger Things brought back Kate Bush, Running Up That
oh,
Hill, and that song is now doing so well 30, 40 years later. And
isn't it?
yeah, and I was talking to a friend about that, just going, I wonder if we'll revel in the music of today like we do of yesterday. You know what I mean? It's just,
I don't know. It's to be seen, because I know that, I mean, I know my parents and they loved the music from the 40s, uh, and but it was different. I don't know if they were bands. I don't know. They had soul artists. Yes, they did. I mean, and I'm still seeing Smokey Robinson do some awesome things. He's an amazing guy, an amazing talent. Just so many people. I see a lot of people, even Berlin, still working. Bless her.
I just saw
Bless
her
her.
again, and I was just, and what's funny is I saw
Yeah.
her at the Del Mar Fairgrounds and Oingo Boingo before they were
Oh,
even big.
oh, wow.
I think
Wow.
about that, just like you were saying that when you're at these concerts and you're shooting Depeche Mode, not knowing what they're going to be, it's weird to think, wow, I saw them before
Oh, yeah.
the big.
Before this happened.
Yeah.
And then there's something sweet too, and there's things too where there was a lot of people that I was, in the same, backstage with and things, and I would look over and who was that? Oh, that's who was singing next to so and so. It still stood out. I know, it was who was sitting next to Jerry Lee Lewis. That's what it was. Backstage with Jerry Lee Lewis. Who is this? And I'll send you the photo,
Yeah.
and you'll see who it is.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was great. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram at Tammy Magaro. Until we meet again, what's your story?